Welcome back. As I mentioned, we have Dan Oweiler here on behalf of Sterling Financial Advisors. Well, how are you?
Good to see you, Lisa.
Good to see you,
Hope you had a good Thanksgiving.
I did. I had a great Thanksgiving, and of course, we're coming up on the holidays, and the New Year's right around the corner.
Right.
And, you know, interesting news that you can help share with us is that recently, Social Security, the percentage and the amount has been increased.
Cost of living.
Cost of living has been increased. So, you know, I wish kind of the employers would sort of take that into consideration as well.
Right. Yeah, I thought it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about the history of the cost of living increases. It only started in, the cost of living adjustments for Social Security only started in 1975.
Okay.
So prior to that, it came about in 1944 with President Roosevelt. He instituted right after the Great Depression, and everybody was struggling with things. And Social Security was meant for a safety net for those that didn't have enough money. It wasn't meant to us to retire on. But ever since 1944 up until 1972, actually, it was kind of on the whims of Congress to give adjustments to the benefits. In 1970, when we went off the gold standard, inflation started to really kick in. And so Congress decided to pass the Social Security COLA law, which went into effect in 1975. And so 1975 is when the first cost of living adjustment came into play. And during that time, we can see, you know, in the late 70s, early 80s, when Jimmy Carter, and we all remember those inflationary years, gas lines and things like that. You know, I think one year was over 14% cost of living adjustment. Well, that was crazy, you know. And after Carter left, Reagan came in and kind of got inflation under control. And over that last few years, you know, it hasn't been too bad. But we're seeing that today, you know.
Well, then maybe we should see more than 5.9, because as we are going through these months, I mean, we're looking at gas prices way higher, and certainly higher in California.
Unfortunately, how Social Security determines cost of living, they exclude certain items.
I see.
One of them is Medicare premiums. Medicare premiums, if they go up, they take that out in determining cost of living adjustments. And so there are 3 or 4 things that are conveniently left out of the cost of living adjustment. You and I, you know, year and a half, 2 years ago, we're paying $3 a gallon for gas. Now it's almost $5 a gallon. You know, and so we're looking at, you know, some things aren't included in the cost of living. However, this 5.9% that they're going to be getting this next year is the largest increase in 4 decades. I mean, you go back, I think we have a chart here that goes back to the beginning of 1975, and I think in the last 4 decades, I think there was one that's 5.8, but I think in 4 decades.
That was 2008, but that was when we had all that housing stuff happen.
And so I think that it's the largest increase, and that's great for those people who are on Social Security. It probably should have been 10% this year.
Well, I would agree, and this is across the United States. So if you're living in, you know, Mississippi, that 5.9 is, you know, it's great. But if you're living in California,
not that the people in Mississippi are any different than us, but the cost of living.
In terms of cost of living, for sure. So that's what I mean, is that the cost of living is different in Mississippi than it is here in California.
You might be paying $600 for a mortgage, and here you're paying $2,600 for a mortgage.
And I wonder, has there ever been any discussion about Social Security kind of doing it by state? Has there ever been that
I haven't
discussion?
heard that. That would be interesting.
Everybody might move here, though.
Well, yeah, I might not want to move to California just because of the cost of living. But, you know, you're probably, you know, that might not be a bad thing. But I doubt that will ever come into play because it's a federal program and they have to do it for. But I think on my chart, I think since 1975, over the last 47 years, the cost of living adjustment has been, 3.6% or something.
Is that like on average?
Yeah, on average over the last 45 years. Over the last 20 years, I think it's been 2.3. Over the last 10 years, it's 2.6 or 2.3. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think that it's important that people don't count on the 5.9% overall, depending upon what inflation does. And the government or the administrations obviously have things that they can do to impact inflation.
Well, exactly.
They have different approaches about doing that.
Right.
Energy, interest rates, those things like that. But the purchasing power of Social Security has lost about 40%. It hasn't kept up with inflation because of the Medicare premiums are excluded from that, and there's a lot of things. In our projections, we only use a 1% cost of living, just because anything over and above that is kind of candy on the cake as far as our projections go. We don't want to use a 5% cost of living adjustment to Social Security in our projections, because it may or may not come into play. There were some years that was even zero. I think 2015 it was zero that we had cost of living adjustments. So we didn't get anything, but that doesn't mean prices still didn't go up.
It may not have, yes, but it may not have been as needed as it is these days. One thing that you mentioned, that Social Security should not be looked at, as something that we're relying on to live on.
Unfortunately,
but lots
about
of people are.
50% of retirees depend on Social Security as their main source of income in retirement, and that's nationwide. That's not everywhere, but but it was never meant to do that. It was meant to be kind of a safety net for those people that, and politicians have made promises over the year that our Social Security would never be taxed. Well, the problem with that is those politicians died and new ones came in. And so we've got a new set of politicians. Going off the gold standard impacted our inflation, because our dollar is only guaranteed by the promise of the U.S. government versus the gold that they had backing it. So there's a lot of things that come into play, and in our retirement planning, Social Security should be a part of that, but based upon the numbers, they say it's going to run out in 2033. Well, that's probably going to go down as our cost of living increases continue to go, and the Social Security fund starts to get depleted more quickly. The other impact is going to be how many baby boomers are retiring in the next decade. They say 80 million of us are going to be retiring in the next decade, going from paying into Social Security to collecting Social Security. And so that's going to impact it quite a bit as well. So when it first started, I think we discussed, some time back, that when Social Security first came into play, there was about 40 employees supporting one person on Social Security. Now it's 3. So the number of people supporting a benefit has dropped from 40 to 3. And so it's just, something's going to hit the fan here pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's very concerning for most of our seniors who are relying on that. So we appreciate you giving us a good overview.
Well, it's not an exciting thing, but cost of livings are always good for Social Security benefits and retirees, and I thought it would be good to have a history on that.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
Hey, good to be here.
All right.
All right.
And we'll be right back after this.